Hello and welcome back to the Grandmaster division of the Intermezzo Championship. After the first batch of games, Marta Bescher and I are both in quite a strong position with 12 points each, and it might be that one of us will win the league at the end. In my next game, I will play against Footloop and Kimmo, and for both of them, it might be an important game for the fight against relegation. However, if one of them wins the game, the door is not yet closed. Maybe one of them also could have a chance in the title race, so that could also be. And of course, I want to collect as many points as possible to hopefully have a chance at winning the league at the end. Now without further ado, we are gonna take a look at the game. In this game I'm in the second position, and first of all we're gonna take a look at the leaders and wonders. We can see that in H3 there is Red Cross, there is also Pierre, there's Gandhi and Churchill for the military, no Manhattan Project. We have Hollywood and Marlene Dietrich, but no Chaplain of Fleming, but there are a lot of cultural leaders in H2 with Shakespeare, Bach and Darwin. We also have Bill Gates and Sid Meier for some lab synergy, also there's the space flight. In H2 we have the Ocean Liner Service, we also have Maria, we have all of those cultural leaders as said, we have Napoleon as one military action leader, we have James Cook but no Suez Canal, also Newton as a strong economical leader. We have Harvard College as a strong economical wonders, and then maybe some more culture-oriented wonders like Louvre, Eiffel Tower, and of course Kremlin is also giving some economical value. In H1 we have Machu Picchu, we have St. Peter's Basilica as one happy face wonder, Himeji Castle but no Great Wall, no Universitas but the Silk Road, we have one military action leader with Jan Žižka, there's Columbus, we have Gutenberg but no Leonardo, we have Michelangelo, could work nicely with Machu Picchu, St. Peter's Basilica, Barbarossa is there, Eleanor and Saladin. Footloop starts and he makes an interesting decision, takes the Stonehenge over the Rome roads, and yeah, the Stonehenge has definitely won some popularity over the last few months. I don't think I have seen a pick like this a lot before, but recently the Stonehenge is picked quite often and also sometimes over some other strong wonders. So Footloop takes the Stonehenge over the Rome roads, which actually leaves me with quite a strong start, because I can take Confucius and the Rome roads, and I think that should just be the best here. Of course I could only take Confucius, maybe hope that I get library or pyramids, but yeah, that's just, I get a very strong wonder, very strong leader, and I also think both of those work relatively nicely in combination, because for Confucius I don't really need a lot of CAs to make him work. I'm guaranteed to seed, meaning that I have a chance to open the 2 resources, which allows me to finish the Rome roads very early, and Confucius gives me science, Rome roads, resources in H1, so that also balances itself out very nicely, so I was very happy that I get both of those cards here. Then it's Kimmo's turn, he takes the frugality, and interesting, he doesn't pick an HA leader, maybe he's hoping to get one of those that are still in the deck, maybe Hippocrates, but maybe just grabbing Alex here wouldn't be that bad. Or maybe also Ashoka could be fine. Because now only Sun Tzu comes out of the deck, Footloop will go for Alex, meaning that Sun Tzu will be the only leader available for Kimmo, and Sun Tzu is maybe not that ideal in 3rd position, there's also no Suez Canal, so I'm not sure how strong Sun Tzu is in this game, and maybe just having Alex could have been better for Kimmo. This turn also basically plays itself. I can go for Confucius, build a mine, increase my population, and then there are just urban growth available. There isn't any difference in how the card row is affected by which one I take, so yeah, just a very clear turn, and I don't think there's any other alternative to what I could do here. I mean, there's Jan Žižka, but don't need to grab him for 3. Kimmo has Sun Tzu and Jan Žižka available, but taking them both would be very, very costly, and probably definitely too costly, so it just goes for mine, goes for Sun Tzu, and then also takes the library. Thanks to the rich land, maybe he has the chance to finish it already the next turn if 2 additional resources are revealed. Footloop has some interesting cards available, he uses Alex immediately, and then he takes Code of Laws Jan Žižka. With Alex he wants to have a new leader as quickly as possible as a replacement, and with Stonehenge of course he wants to have something to invest into it, so just taking those 2 cards seems like a good idea. I see the blunder into the deck. I don't want to commit to the developed territory, especially not because I play against Sansu, and also Footloop will get additional draws in with Jan Žižka. The development of religion is revealed, and again this turn is pretty clear, I would say. I increase my population, get the second lab going immediately, and then I can just take Monarchy in the Engineering Genius. Engineering Genius will allow me to finish the Rome Roads at the next turn, so I think that's the better pick than the Rich Land. And the Monarchy is just nice to have, so that I hopefully can invest the Science of Confucius into something nice. I might miss out on the Code of Laws next turn, maybe I want to just finish the Rome Roads, then I don't have a free civil action to grab the Code of Laws, and then both the Code of Laws would be gone, so I think having the Monarchy is quite nice. I get the Monarchy for one civil action. Maybe there could even be the case of doing a revolution at the next turn, but I have the additional science from Confucius, so I think just finishing Rome Roads and maybe waiting one more turn to go for the Monarchy peacefully might be the better idea than doing the revolution, but it could be an option that could be considered at the next turn. I draw 2 tactics, so knights would be very nice. Kimmo seats, and the development of planning is revealed. The options for that are development of settlement, politics, or warfare. So probably settlement or warfare will be taken from this. Kimmo, I think, takes the settlement, and he increases population, wants to finish the library before committing to the second lab, and then he takes the rich land. Could have maybe taken urban growth, then he could finish library and build a second lab at the next turn, but the rich land is of course also a useful card. Footloop seeds and the development of science is revealed. This additional science will actually allow me to go for the Monarchy peacefully already at the next turn. Footloop grabs the iron, he develops it. Doing one upgrade wouldn't get him out of corruption, he would have to build a warrior, but instead of building a warrior, he just builds one additional iron mine for 5 resources. That also gets him out of corruption, leaves him with 6 resources for the next turn, so he has the option to just finish the Stonehenge, maybe getting into Code of Laws, or he can maybe just go for more iron upgrades, but he gets some very strong resource production going. But he commits 1 worker into mines, but with Jan Žižka, maybe he will be fine with his military. Also with the additional happy face from the Stonehenge, he reveals the Legion tactic, so he has a tactic for Jan Žižka now, but he didn't find a civil action yet to elect Jan Žižka. This turn I seed the heavy cavalry into the deck. There's no Genghis Khan. It could potentially be a nice tactic for me if I get knights, but I have the medieval army, so that should also be quite nice. And I still didn't want to commit to the developed territory with having no defense card drawn, with not going for cartography, with not knowing if maybe Kimmo will go for the cartography. So I just seeded a tactic in it as one Science Confucius event. Development of agriculture is revealed. I can go for the monarchy peacefully this turn. I could just increase my population to get out of corruption. I could think about maybe grabbing Code of Laws, Cultural Heritage. I could use Engineering Genius, build 1 stage of the Rome Roads. That wouldn't cause corruption for me, so that could be an interesting option. And yeah, that could be an interesting option. Also Columbus could be interesting. I at least have the developed territory in hand for him, so I could maybe keep Confucius for a little bit longer. But at the end I just made a decision to finish the Rome Roads this turn, get the additional resource production going, and with not committing the food I thought that Barbarossa could maybe be an interesting option. I didn't build any unit yet, I have this medieval army tactic. Maybe once the deck is flipped I don't necessarily want to seed that often anymore with Confucius. And then just going for Barbarossa, maybe getting 1 copy of Knights could be quite interesting. And I just get a Rome Roads going immediately, I have this out of the way. But now I'm on monarchy, I won't get a Code of Laws, so I will maybe be stuck on 5 civil actions for quite a while, which isn't fine for now, but in age 2 there might be a point where 5 civil actions are not really that much. So having the Code of Laws and maybe getting the Cultural Heritage to allow getting into Code of Laws more easily could definitely also be considered here. Then I draw a fighting band tactic, so I also have now the option to go for something if I miss out on knights. I mean, the Legion tactic was already revealed by Footloop, so I could have also gone for that. Kimmo seeds, so the deck flips now, development of crafts is revealed. Kimmo finishes the library this turn. He will go for the Code of Laws, but can't develop it already this turn. He also wants to have the swordsman, and then builds the warrior to get out of corruption. Footloop doesn't see it, he increases population, goes for Yanchishka, upgrades one mine, it still isn't enough for him to get out of corruption, and so he builds one warrior, is now the strongest, and gets out of corruption. Maybe at the next turn he can finish the Stonehenge. I this turn seed, and actually I don't remember what event I just seeded. Maybe I will remember it again. Yeah, I actually don't remember what event it was. Maybe just a Confucius event, but I think it was an actual event, so I hopefully will remember it. I think it was the historic territory, but I'm not 100% sure. I have Confucius, I am the weakest, but I might also stay the weakest, so yeah, I definitely want to seed. Also I have knowledge about some events, and I didn't seed any strength events myself. The wealthy territory is revealed, and yeah, I'm able to win that actually. I was willing to bid a warrior and one colonization card, and it is actually enough to win it. So I send a warrior away and a colonization card, and then I indeed go for Barbarossa. Now I definitely need to rebuild some units, and just doing it with Barbarossa is just very nice. And also, as I said, I'm now the weakest. I don't necessarily want to push every turn. I don't want to be forced to push every turn. So now switching to Barbarossa to rebuild those units should be quite nice, or to rebuild the one unit. But I will actually use his activation or his ability 2 times already this turn. And then I have 2 warriors, but it still allows me to get into heavy cavalry in case I should get the knights. However, doing those 2 Barbarossa activations isn't enough to get me out of corruption, and so I made a decision to go for this 3rd lab to get out of corruption. It increases my science production, and just make sure that I can get out of corruption this turn. I commit some units or another worker into the lab, so that could maybe be a little bit problematic. One civil action I want to use to take the engineering genius, and I kinda was eyeing those 2 copies of theology, so I thought about maybe just grabbing the theology this turn, because without the theology I might not be able to keep this lab for very long, but with the theology I can use Barbarossa one more time to get one more worker going, hopefully a knight with the medieval army, and then I could upgrade to theology to make sure that even after the age ends and I lose the 2 yellow tokens, I still have enough happy faces to make this all work. So then the 3rd lab would be more justified. But the problem is I have now a lot of resources actually, and if I just take the theology, there could be a problem that I maybe don't have a nice way to invest those resources. I mean, maybe the alchemy is available, maybe there will be the 2nd copy of iron or another copy of alchemy, so there might definitely be something that I can use to invest my resources in, but it felt a little bit bad, and so at the end I made a decision to actually go for the Taj Mahal. I have to pay 1 civil action for it, it isn't completely free, but it allows me to make very nice use out of the engineering genius, and I just have something now to dump my resources into. Maybe not the ideal thing, but still getting a little bit of additional culture production is also not too bad, and hopefully I don't slow any other development down. I have a lot of resources now. And then I can also build one more step. And I was hoping that I maybe still have a shot to get one of those theologies at the next turn, but it definitely isn't for certain. And without the theologies I might have some happy face issues, but I was hoping that I might have still a shot at get one of those for cheaper at the next turn. And then if I don't get anything nice to invest my resources into, I can just finish the Taj Mahal. Also, I actually have a lot of blue tokens then. I have 3 additional blue tokens from the wealthy territory, and then 1 from Rome Roads, 1 from the Taj Mahal, so I might not have a lot of corruption problems this game. Yeah, and so I also was hoping that maybe knights will be available the next turn, so that I can go for a reasonable amount of strength and can use Barbarossa for another nice activation. I draw 1 card, and it is the Crusades. Kimmo seeds, and a blunder is revealed, the 1 science event from Confucius. Kimmo increases population, goes for Code of Laws this turn, takes the breakthrough and the masonry, still doesn't build a 2nd lab yet, and no, grabs breakthrough in masonry. Footloop seeds, and sadly there is a strength event now, the border conflict, so I will have to lose something. At least the additional resource actually maybe not even that useful for Footloop, because he has a lot of resource anyway. Of course, more resources are probably never bad, but maybe it's not really what he needs this turn. And so he goes for one more upgrade, builds a third farm actually, so he can maybe get more value out of the Yanshish guy actually immediately. He has now 2 Legion tactics. And then at the next turn he can maybe finally finish the Stonehenge, or maybe just don't finish it at all, but I think the science is actually quite useful for him, and the happy face maybe as well. This turn I could just finish the Taj Mahal, but now there is something nice available that I can invest my resource into, and also going into iron now means that I can just lose 1 mine to the border conflict and rebuild it directly as an iron mine. Then I basically don't lose the civil action, only the 2 resources from not having the mine and upgrading it, but I don't lose the civil action. Normally if you lose something to border conflict and you have to rebuild it, you lose not only the resource but also the civil actions, but now that isn't the case, so I think that's not a nice reason to go for the iron this turn. And I build 1, I upgrade 1, I have now some nice resource production going that also justifies the Taj Mahal even more, I would say. And then with my last civil action I can still grab the theology, meaning that if the age ends I can just develop it, upgrade this religion, and hopefully don't have any happy face issues. No knights in a row yet, but maybe I still have a shot at getting one of those copies at the next turn. There is one issue though, and I will reveal the fighting band tactic now, but I still would need 1 defense card to defend against Footloop. I could have thought about not rebuilding the mine, maybe building another warrior now, that would make me completely safe from an aggression, but I kinda rather want to go into medieval army instead of committing heavily to to warriors, especially I don't know yet if I get the second copy of swordsman, so I didn't really like this. At least I only need 1 defense card, so I was hoping that Footloop maybe doesn't try an aggression, but the thing is I already sent 1 colonization card away for the wealthy territory. So yeah, with that I was a little bit worried about this, but I was hoping that with me only needing 1 defense card to defend, hopefully there won't be an aggression blade against me. I draw the foray and also the naval trade agreement. Kimmo seeds, and the heavy cavalry is revealed, so another 1 science for everyone. Kimmo develops the masonry this turn, goes for bread and circuses, builds 1 lab as well. Doesn't go for Gutenberg, interestingly. Could have built a lab maybe with him, but I mean there's 1 copy of alchemy left, 1 printing press on the row, so maybe that could have been interesting. Now the only leader left is Michelangelo, could maybe give some cultural production, and Kimmo also has the masonry, so that also could be a fine leader. But Gutenberg would be available now, so it could maybe be an interesting option, and sadly, as you can see, Footloop does try an aggression. I didn't draw a defense card, so I will actually lose 1 lab to the raid. And now Footloop sadly gains 2 additional resources. Again, maybe the additional resources are not even that useful for him, but of course it's definitely not great. I will lose my lab, and Footloop will gain 2 additional resources. Footloop does still finish this as a Stonehenge, uses the science to develop the Code of Laws, finishes it, but now he can't get out of corruption. I think also without a raid he wouldn't be able to get out of corruption. And no, but he has that many resource production that it maybe doesn't make a big difference. As you can see, I actually seeded a foray in here. And yeah, this foray, and I think the event that I seeded earlier maybe wasn't the historic territory, maybe the cultural influence. We will see. I'm still not sure, but I think it wasn't the historic territory. But we will see. Hopefully I will remember it. Going back to the turn is sometimes a little bit difficult because this is working a little bit weirdly sometimes. It doesn't always direct you to the turn where you click on it. Alright, so this turn I see the foray. I am the weakest at the moment, I actually don't have knowledge about the top events, so that is definitely a little bit risky. But this turn I will actually transition from being weakest to being strongest. And I just really liked it to have a payoff card for that in the next event deck. But there could be some really bad cards, there could be call to arms. Then I can't go for knights and develop them this turn, which would be annoying. Maybe I could switch to swordsman then and go for 2 swordsmen, so I still have way how I can get strongest then, but I would prefer to have the knights because that just allows for a lot easier transitions into other tactics in H2. And no, so I was willing to take that risk. And there's the cultural influence, so that was an event that I seeded earlier. Sorry for not knowing this. Yeah, alright. So this turn I can then still go for the knights. There was no call to arms, so I was happy that there's no strength event. It was definitely a risk. Maybe not really a risk worth taking, but I mean, now having the foray in there with me getting a lot stronger is definitely quite nice. So now that there was no bad strength event on top, it paid off at the end. And now I lost the lab to the raid, but at least I can now make use out of this population. So maybe it isn't actually too bad to have lost a lab, because now instead of having 3 labs, I can use this worker to put it into knights, go for another knight with a Barbarossa activation, reveal the medieval army, tactic, go for 1 upgrade to my mines, and I'm now at 10 strength at 7 resource production. Of course, the Rome roads will switch very soon to science production, and I will be at 6 resource production. And no, at the next turn I can go for theology to avoid any uprising issues. So no, I think that is also quite interesting. I mean, if I would have not lost the lab to the raid, I probably would have kept it. But now that I have lost it, it's maybe not too bad, because at least it allows me to put another worker into knight, so maybe it even kind of saved me a civil action. Not really, but it's maybe not as bad actually for me. Then this turn Kimmo seeds, even though he's the weakest, so that's interesting. And a Dark Age is actually revealed, so no, I am happy that I don't lose any science here. Footloop loses 1 science. Kimmo goes for the Swordsman this turn, builds 1, upgrades 1, and that means that he actually won't reveal a tactic with Sansu, so no tactic will get upgraded. I mean, against Jan Shishka, that's maybe a good decision to make. And then he grabs Sprinting Press and the Irrigation. And the next turn he can then maybe go for Michelangelo. Footloop seeds and the new deposits are revealed, so I am happy that it is revealed now, because at the next turn or after Footloop's turn I would get 1 resource less out of this, so the Rome roads get 1 additional production basically. I and Footloop both gain 7 resources, and Footloop again has lots of resources. He has got a lot of production from his iron mines, and then he got a border conflict raid, now the new deposits, and it means that he can just finish the Magic Castle now and still has 4 resource corruption. So he has to also increase his population, but it also isn't enough. He still has 2 corruption, but again, maybe it's not too bad to have the corruption. But yeah, I mean, if he has corruption all the time, then of course those upgrades aren't doing as much as they maybe could. So that's still maybe not great, but at the next turn he can maybe start getting into alchemies, then he has nice resource and science production, and then he definitely doesn't have a bad position. This turn I seed the Crusades into the deck. I'm the strongest of rays in the deck, so I think it definitely makes sense to push here. And the event revealed is the historic territory. And no, I was willing to bid 1 knight. Sadly, I don't have a colonization card, and it would actually be quite nice to win it, because with getting a unit back into the next area of my yellow bank, I have just enough food to rebuild it. With the happy phase, I have the necessary happy phase to rebuild it, and then I don't necessarily have to go for theology. So I think the historic territory would be quite nice for me, especially because I can rebuild this cheaply with Barbarossa. But sadly, I don't have a defense card, and so Footloop wins it. But at least he has to throw 3 defense cards away, so that's maybe also not too bad. This turn I have to go for the theology. And then after doing this, I still have 3 civil actions left. And there are some stuff that I can do. Breakthroughs in a row, also the alchemy. And yeah, I could maybe just grab both of those cards. But then the question is, what do I do with my last civil action? I could just finish or build 1 stage of the Taj Mahal. The thing is, if I build 1 stage of the Taj Mahal with the Engineering Genius, and I kind of want to use the Engineering Genius in the stage, then I have corruption. And because of that, I made the decision to finish the Taj Mahal. That gets me out of corruption. I get the culture production immediately. And then I have to make a decision if I take breakthrough or the alchemy. And I made the decision to go for the breakthrough. Alchemy could still be fine, but it's also relatively late. And I was hoping that maybe instead I will get maybe scientific method going or something different. Finishing Taj Mahal is also nice in that sense, that it leaves me open for new wonder. An early ocean liner service could be very, very strong. Harvard College could also be very interesting. So now that I finished it, I can just take one of those wonders if one of those is available, and especially with the Ocean Liner service, that's just such a strong wonder. If this is in the game, I often try to make sure that I just have a free space for my wonder, and that I also maybe have iron production, because that is just such a strong wonder. And yeah, so I don't have the alchemy. It could give me some issues to invest my resource into, but the good news is that thanks to my many blue tokens, I won't have any corruption issues at the next turn. So even if I don't find anything immediately to invest my resource into, hopefully in 2 turns there will be something available for me, selective breeding, scientific method, one of the wonders, and then I can invest my resource into this instead of going for those H1 alchemies. I draw my first H2 cards, and they are actually quite military heavy. Raid, refugees, involve technology. Kimmo opens the rebellion, but no one loses any civil actions to that. And then Kimmo goes for Michelangelo, gets some additional culture production, but maybe can't grab a nice wonder already this turn. I mean, he could have maybe grabbed the Harvard College, but only at the cost of corruption. He goes for another bread and circuses, scoring now 4 additional culture production with culture per turn with Michelangelo, and he also starts upgrading his food production. Footloop has his turn, he goes for alchemy. Could grab Conmon, also Riflemen are interesting, but instead he rather wants to get his production going, and is now at 7 resource for science production, so that's definitely not bad. And he also rebuilds his warrior that he lost when he ascended away to the historic territory. At my turn, there are also some interesting cards in the row. The Rifleman could be interesting, definitely a technology that I would like to get at some point, but I think I am the even more important card, and first of all I see the refugees in, because there is still the foray, and now I'm able to win this, and now I just win it for certain. I mean, the chance should be relatively nice that I will stay one of the 2 strongest, but now I have it out of the deck, and the good news about the refugees is that it is, I know exactly when it will be coming, it is exactly at this spot. So it is of course quite a swingy event, but with knowing exactly when it is coming, I can maybe prepare for it very nicely and hopefully have a shot at winning it. But of course it's a little bit of a swingy event. I won't grab the Rifleman because I think the Harvard College is just too strong for me here. And that means that with Kimmo having Swordsman, maybe Footloop will get the Rifleman, maybe he invests into those immediately, upgrades his warriors, and then of course I might not have good chances to win the refugees. Hopefully I at least will manage to not lose to the refugees, and yeah, as I said, at least I know exactly when those will be revealed, and hopefully that will allow me to play around those a little bit. I can take 1 food from the foray. That allows me that after grabbing Harvard and building 1 stage, I can use Barbarossa to build 1 knight, getting out of corruption, using his ability 1 more time, and now I'm just at 0 food, so that should be very nice. I just built a stage of the Harvard College. Of course I could maybe think about a drama for Bach, but I have strong resource productions. I would prefer operas over dramas to have with Bach, especially because I don't have a lot of food production yet, and I also don't think I need any of the other cards to just finish at just building 1 stage of the Harvard College to have 1 more civil action at the next turn. I think is the best thing that I can do here, and then my science production will go up to 6 at the next turn, so I was definitely quite happy about this. I draw the wealthy territory and also 1 aggression. Kimmo seeds, while being the weakest, and the reds are revealed, but not a lot of food is lost. I actually don't lose any food at all. Kimmo grabs the first copy of Conmon, upgrades 1 farm to get out of corruption, and he will actually grab the Rifleman, which I was very happy about, because as I said, Footloop could maybe just go for the Rifleman and then increase his strength very easily, but now that isn't possible for him. I mean, for Kimmo I think it makes sense. He knows that both me and Footloop want to have the Rifleman, and now it means that one of us definitely will miss out on it, and at some point the Rifleman might also get useful for himself, maybe in age 3. But of course he also has to be a little bit careful about hand space, but on the other hand, he has the library, so maybe he doesn't have to be too careful. And at the next turn he will have 6 science. Maybe he can just do a revolution to Conmon. That of course would mean corruption, but maybe it could be worth it. And Footloop sadly gets an early ocean liner service with a strong production, with having committed 4 workers to mines, 3 to farms. I think the ocean liner service is quite strong for him. and I wasn't too happy to see him get this early ocean liner service, but at least I got the early Harvard College, so we both got something strong, and he is willing to take ocean liner service and a journalism, meaning that he also has something to invest the population from the journalism into, and if he manages to finish this all relatively quickly, he definitely could transition into quite a strong position where he can just maybe build a bunch of journalisms and still have maybe enough population thanks to this early ocean liner service to defend himself. But he doesn't grab the Conmon, so maybe that will be gone. Or that actually will be gone, because I will definitely grab one of those yellow cards, so then there are only Republics left for him. This turn I seeded. First of all, I'm one of the... I am the strongest. And also I thought I kinda want to accelerate the deck at the moment, so that maybe the refugees are revealed while I'm still while I'm still the strongest, before maybe one of the other players has a nice way to overtake me in strength. So I see the developed territory into the deck, even though I don't have any defense cards, just to hopefully reveal the refugees relatively quickly. Also the crusades are in the deck that I could maybe win. So I seed. Sadly no crusades are revealed, instead a good harvest. So now it isn't that nice to be on 0 food, because now I'm back to 2 food, and it isn't enough to do anything with Barbarossa. I mean, the next Barbarossa activation would lead to an uprising anyway, but I would have preferred it if the good harvest wouldn't be in the deck. This turn I can finish the Harvard College, and then I still have 3 civil actions left. I go up to 6 science production, so that is definitely quite nice. And Barbarossa probably isn't doing that much in the next turns. I mean, you never know, maybe I will get 1 copy of reserves. And for example, in 1 game of the season, I also had not any food, but then I got 2 reserves, and that allowed me to go for 2 cannons, going for 2 mobile artilleries. And then I switched to Newton, maybe you remember the game. So you never know, there could still be the chance that I get more activation out of Barbarossa. But as I also said, the next worker will be unhappy, so I just thought Barbarossa might not be doing a lot, and so I made a decision to switch to Bach immediately. At least getting a little bit of additional culture production for now, maybe meaning that I don't fall too much behind Footloop and culture. And there are still 2 copies of operas left. Of course, it's not guaranteed that I will get one of those, but both of my opponents have to be a little bit careful. Footloop has a lot to do. He can't grab operas easily. Kimmo has to be a little bit careful about hand space, because he doesn't have a lot of science, so he can't grab too many technology cards without it being a little bit risky. So I was hoping that I have decent chances to get the opera at some point. And then Bach will hopefully be quite strong for me. I think Bach and Harvard College are actually quite a nice combination, because now I can just upgrade my labs into operas while still having decent science production going. So I think that might be quite a strong combination. And then with my last 2 civil actions, I just grab the Urban Growth and a Breakthrough. So I just get 2 strong yellow cards. Urban Growth I can maybe use if I hopefully will get the opera at some point, and the Breakthrough is of course also quite a strong card. Then I draw 3 new cards, another territory, Ravages of Time, which I maybe don't want to seed, because losing the Rome roads isn't too great, and might be better for Kimmo, who only loses library. Footloop might manage to lose the Happy Face from Stonehenge, so he might manage to not have too many issues. Kimmo, interestingly, goes for Cavalryman, reveals the classic army tactic, so that's interesting that he reveals this tactic already. And also interestingly, he is grabbing the Eiffel Tower, and that is certainly interesting, because he is on bronze mines only. He doesn't have a nice way to get into coal, because he is relatively low in science. He will miss out in the engineering genius in the first copy of reserves, so I don't really see how he can finish that easily. Meaning at least he gets an additional resource out of it from Michelangelo, which can maybe help him with some other things, but just grabbing the reserves instead maybe is the better choice, because I just really don't see how he plans on finishing that on the next turns. And I mean, maybe he's hoping that he will get into coal at some point and then finish it, but that will then be relatively late. So I'm really not sure about grabbing this Eiffel Tower, even though it is with a discount and with getting 1 resource with Michelangelo. Footloop goes for the strategy. It's a little bit awkward for him. It's nice that Kimmo let the strategy stay on 2 civil actions for him, because as we said, both Conmons are gone, So there are no only Republics left for Footloop, and if he loses Yanshishka, he might be stuck on 2 military actions, so the strategy I think is a very important card, but of course he also would really like to finish the Ocean Liner service. But he can't have both, and it means that he has to delay the Ocean Liner service, something I was quite happy about. And he also scrubbing the cannon now that he delays it anyway, but it means that he again has corruption, builds a warrior to at least only have 2 corruption, but that is at least something nice for me, that he can't finish the Ocean Liner service that quickly. It's my turn, I'm still the strongest. Kimmo might get stronger at his turn if he fulfills the classic army, and so I thought maybe it's nice to at least get the Crusades out of the deck still, and then maybe I won't have a chance to win the refugees, but then I could maybe at least try to not lose it before Footloop maybe manages to get more strength going. So I again pushed another territory, the wealthy territory too, which again I'm not really that nicely prepared for, so I was not too happy about pushing all of those territories. At least I have a lot of science, so maybe I can go for the navigation, but I don't have the most civil actions, so that might be the biggest issue for that. And but I was still willing to see it. I didn't want to see the Ravages of Time, because I thought it might hit me more than my opponents. And then the immigration is revealed, so sadly not the Crusades, and Kimmo will get 1 population at his turn. And this turn I think I definitely have to grab those Riflemen, because Kimmo just revealed a classic army tactic. Now that I have the Riflemen, I can just go for them and copy this at some point. And if I don't take it, Footloop gets the Rifleman, and I think that's just a very strong technology for him. And even another big reason is that Kimmo potentially could actually get quite threatening relatively quickly. For example, he could have a war, he could declare the war, he could switch to Napoleon, build 1 more cavalryman, and then he could get a relatively big war ongoing. So I think grabbing those riflemen is very important, and it's very nice for me that those are available. Then the question is what to do with my last 2 civil actions. The selective breeding is also a card that I really want to have to get my food production going. So I was thinking about grabbing the selective breeding, but there's a second copy left. If I don't take any of those cards, there's maybe even a chance that I will get it at the next turn, because Kimmo has irrigation, Footloop has the Ocean Liner service, has irrigation in hand, has 3 farms, so I think both of my opponents don't need it. If Kimmo doesn't take either James Cook or Efficient Upgrade, and of course he might take the Efficient Upgrade, but maybe there's a chance that he doesn't take it because he doesn't have the most hand space, but sadly he has the library. So maybe there's a chance that I get this copy. If not, there is a second copy left, and the most important reason is it could be nice to just have this in hand, but I think I have to go for Rifleman already this turn. Because as I said, maybe it's not that likely that Kimmo has drawn a war already, but if he has, or even if he maybe only has an aggression in hand, he could go for Napoleon, build 1 cavalryman, and that would actually put him at +15 at 26 strength. And if I go for the Rifleman now, then I can copy the classic army at the next turn. So hopefully I have a nice way to defend myself. So hopefully I won't be a war target. Hopefully if he does this, I can defend against potential aggressions, or at least threaten to defend against those. And so I think it's very important to get those Riflemen going already this turn. And so sadly I have to miss out on the selective breeding. But maybe I have a chance to get it at the next turn, and if not, hopefully I will manage to get a second copy relatively soon. And then with my last civil action I just picked the reserves. I draw actually a second war, so maybe it's not that likely that Kimmo also has drawn 1 of the 2 that are left. And Kimmo isn't going for a war, isn't going for Napoleon, instead he is going for Darwin. And then he increases his population, builds 1 printing press for 3 with the urban growth, and then builds this cavalryman, is now the strongest. Sadly now the Crusades and refugees are coming, so that is not ideal. Footloop this turn finally can finish the Ocean Liner service, but it means that he doesn't go for Republic, interestingly. I think he could have gone for Republic and still finished the Ocean Liner service. So it's interesting that he doesn't do this, but he's maybe a little bit afraid. I mean, Kimmo just went for a bunch of strength, and maybe he's hoping that he can just get the Republic at the next turn. If he invests the science in the Republic now, he doesn't have enough to go for strategy at the next turn, so maybe that just would leave him too vulnerable, and with that, it's maybe a fine decision to not go for the Republic already this turn. As you can see, the selective breeding is indeed available for me now. Kimmo didn't take the efficient upgrading, didn't take James Cook, so now I can just get a selective breeding for 1 civil action. There is the first copy of Opera available for 3 civil actions, but I wasn't willing to pay that many civil actions for it. I think it's more important to get my food production going now, and there are still 2 copies left, so both of my opponents would have to take 1 copy. Both of them don't really need the Opera. I mean, Footloop could maybe do something with it, but yeah, Kimmo doesn't really need it, and so I was hoping that I still get one of those 2 copies at some point, and I wasn't willing to pay that many civil actions for it, with me only being on 5 civil actions. And instead I'd rather just go for the selective breeding, get my food production going. With having Bach, I definitely want to have some population available that I can put into operas, and with that it's just nice to get a food production going now as early as possible. After going for those 2 upgrades, I have 1 civil action left. And also I copied the classic army tactics, which is sadly not enough to be the strongest again. I was, however, thinking, and it is also the reason why I didn't seed this turn, that maybe I have a shot on getting strongest again before the refugees are revealed. Because Kimmo might just stay on 22 strength. Of course, maybe he puts another work into units, but he might not do this. And then at the next turn, I have maybe a shot to build a rifleman to go up to 23 strength. And then with not seeding now, maybe I'm still in time to be the strongest again for the refugees. So that's why I didn't want to seed this turn, and also in general I didn't want to put another colony into the deck with not really being prepared for any of those that are in the deck at the moment. And no, so that's why I didn't seed. And because of that, I think the strongest card for myself would actually be the Frugality, because then I could just increase my population 2 times at the next turn and then build 1 rifleman. I was also hoping that maybe one of the operas will be available for 2 or 1 civil action. Then I could take the opera, develop it, upgrade my lab, increase my population thanks to the additional happy face from upgrading the lab. I could put it into Rifleman, and it would maybe be the even nicer way to get stronger, getting 1 opera going, while also making sure that I hopefully will be the strongest for the refugees. But it only is possible if I go for opera, if one of the operas I will available for 2 or for 1 civil action. And if this isn't the case, then I need to increase my population 2 times, and then the Frugality would be quite nice. But I ended up taking the reserves, and it is basically a little bit of a denial for both of my opponents. First of all, maybe the more clear denial is that I take this reserves away from Kimmo, and with him being on bronze mines, with him having this Eiffel Tower laying around, which even with the reserves I don't really see how he wants to finish this in any time soon. But the reserves definitely would be very helpful for him. Maybe also even the food to get 1 more population, and he might have some uprising issues relatively soon. Of course, you might say now he's getting the wave for 1 civil action cheaper, it doesn't really hurt him that much, but with the reserves available, I think he could just do a turn like build 1 stage of Eiffel Tower, grab reserves, Revolutionary Idea, and wave for 2. I think that would be quite a decent turn, and so I think taking the reserves away from Kimmo is definitely hurting him a little bit, but the main reason and why I took it is actually that Napoleon is discarded on Kimmo's turn, so Footloop doesn't have the option to go for Napoleon. Maybe that's not even that important. I thought that maybe Footloop would prefer to go for Newton anyway. Maybe he can go for those journalisms, and then he can get a lot of value out of Newton. But the thing is, the refugees are coming, and if Footloop has maybe a defensive army, he could go for an outdated defensive army or maybe something else, and he could maybe somehow manage to get stronger with Napoleon, and then maybe I have less chances to win the refugees. And also in general, with having Bach, I might just be able to get a relatively big Hulch lead in case I get the operas, and then it could be nice if Footloop doesn't have the option to go for Napoleon, because he could maybe, if he has a nice tactic and gets the technologies, he could maybe pressure me, and then I maybe have some issues. Not really sure if it was really worth it to go for this denial, because Newton is also quite strong, and while Napoleon is maybe better to go for military in the short run, Newton might actually better to go for military in the long run, because the additional value he gives might translate into a bigger military on the long run. So it's maybe not even that much of a military denial. So I'm not really sure if it was really worth it to grab the reserves. but no, it's still a somewhat useful card for me. I at least still have the option to play one of those reserves for food to increase my population 2 times if one of the operas isn't available for 2 civil actions or cheaper. And no, so at the end I made a decision to take this reserves instead of maybe just picking the frugality. I draw the conquistadors, maybe a tactic I don't really need with already having the classic army. Kimmo seeds, so sadly I don't win the crusades, but if Footloop doesn't seed, I might have still chances to win the refugees, which is of course the more important card. Kimmo builds one stage of the Eiffel Tower to get out of corruption, grabs revolutionary idea, grabs wave, and interestingly the cannons. It's interesting because he already has the classic army. I'm the one who doesn't have the cannons, and I also have the classic army, so it's interesting that he is willing to grab the cannons here. But maybe the other cards are just also not that important for him like this. At least he is prepared for H3 tactics, could maybe go for modern army. And at the next turn maybe he's finally able to get this conmon going with the revolutionary idea. Footloop doesn't see it, so that might give me chances to win the refugees. And Footloop is actually revealing the Hussars, is then switching to Newton after having used the military action from Jan Žižka, develops the cavalryman, builds one, builds another one, is now at 19 strength, takes the team sports and upgrades one mine. And as you can see, if he maybe would have gone for Napoleon, he would now be at 23 strength, then I actually wouldn't have the chance to win the refugees that easily. So that definitely could have made maybe my taking the reserves did make a difference. Maybe Footloop would have gone for Newton anyway. Definitely could see it that he would have gone for him anyway. But it could have maybe still been nice that he at least doesn't have the option to go for Napoleon here. Now it's my turn. I don't want to see it, because this turn, as you can see, Footloop didn't grab the opera, which I was very happy about. The second one would be available, but only for 3, which wouldn't allow me to do what I can do now. Because I can grab the opera, develop it, upgrade a lab, build one unit with increasing my population. After doing all of this, I have 1 civil action left, and I was thinking about either breakthrough or architecture. And at the end I made a decision to go for the breakthrough. We can maybe talk about the reasons at the end of my turn. I take it now so that I can use it immediately with the Harvard College. I upgrade 1 lab with the urban growth to opera, going up to 11 culture production. That gives me 1 additional happy phase that I can use to put 1 more worker into units. Now I'm the strongest, and maybe I will have a shot to win the refugees. Kimmo doesn't have a free worker. Maybe he could go for Rifleman, but as I said, he can go for Conmon now. So I was hoping that I maybe have a shot to win the refugees. Of course, Footloop maybe also has a way to get stronger, but he will lose the yellow tokens before his turn, and then he has to fix his happy faces, and I don't think he can go for team spots and 2 cavalrymen, so I was hoping that I have chances to win the refugees now. Now, I could have gone for the architecture, then I would have 3 signs less now. And architecture definitely could be quite nice. It would allow me to build the next operas for cheaper. But I have already built 1 opera now. I might only build maybe 2 operas. And then it saves me 4 resources, which isn't that much. Of course, maybe I build even more urban buildings, maybe go for multimedia or something like this. So then it definitely could save me even more resources. Could also be nice for potential Red Cross or something. So the architecture definitely has its arguments. But I thought I have relatively nice nice amount of resources. I have those 2 reserves in hand. Maybe I will get 1 of those copies of urban growth or efficient upgrade at the next turn, to get maybe the next opera also for relatively cheap. And then I don't maybe don't really need the resource of architecture. And one thing, which is definitely one disadvantage that I have, is my low amount of civil actions and also military actions. So I think getting H3 government might be very strong, but if I invest my science into architecture now at a cost of not getting breakthrough, it might definitely be a lot harder to go for an H3 government while still having enough science to go for air forces, maybe also military theory. So I rather went for the 3 signs of the breakthrough, so that I hopefully will be able to go for an H3 government farm, and also maybe for all of the necessary technologies that I need to defend myself, because now with Bach I definitely might get a culture lead now relatively quickly, and then just being able to defend myself might be quite nice. This turn I draw another war, also the Cold War. Kimmo doesn't see it, he destroys something, but luckily not to build another unit, instead to build another printing press. And he also goes for the constitutional monarchy, is interestingly grabbing the selective breeding, which is definitely interesting. I already have it. Footloop has the ocean liner service and 3 farms. He will lose the irrigation. He interestingly didn't develop it at the last turn. Maybe or you still would have had the option to go for team spots now. I mean, maybe he was just thinking he has 3 farms, so he doesn't really need the ability to upgrade it to irrigation. No, but he could have developed it for free even with Newton, so it might have been worth it, but maybe Radar wants to have his science for something else. So it isn't really a hate draft what Kimmo is doing here, just maybe is for himself, but I'm not really sure about this. There are some yellow cards that he could take instead. And I mean, maybe the additional food production if he actually plans on going for this, which I mean we have to expect with him taking it, unless he maybe really wants to deny it from Footloop, but I don't think that's necessary. I mean, the additional food might be useful. He definitely doesn't have a lot of food production now, but it's just not that efficient upgrading from irrigation to selective breeding. I think just getting maybe efficient upgrade could be nice, and then hoping that early mechanized agriculture, early computers, maybe even early oil or something is available. He missed out on both copies of coal, and then he could maybe build a little bit of more economy, but I'm not sure about the selective breeding. And then he is also grabbing this architecture, meaning that I won't have another chance to grab one of those at my next turn. Then H3 starts. And Footloop also doesn't see it. He goes for the team sports, builds one, and is grabbing Bill Gates for 3 civil actions. Doesn't want to give this option to any of the other players. I mean, we are both not that nicely prepared for him, but Bill Gates might also be quite strong for Footloop. If maybe computers show up at his next turn, he can go for those with Newton, switch to Bill Gates. It definitely could lead to quite a strong H3 for him if that happens, so it might be worth it to just take him now. And then he also takes the Elven Growth, isn't willing to put one warrior into cavalryman. I think that would get him out of corruption, but that would also mean he would miss out on 1 draw, and maybe he wants to get as many draws as possible because he maybe could be that he thinks that going for military might be his best shot here to overtake me when I now get this big culture lead with Bach. I am now the strongest, the refugees are on top, so now is the time that I can seed. I seed a Cold War in, hopefully I will be able to be one of those 2 strongest, and then hopefully I also can use the science very nicely. And yeah, very nice to win the refugees. Footloop will lose 1 population, and no, that's definitely quite nice for me. This turn I take the efficient upgrade, I upgrade 1 lab to opera, I build 1 rifleman, and then I definitely want to have the air forces. I thought about maybe just building 1 opera, not building this unit, but I thought that maybe going for a lot of military pressure might be quite nice now that I also have the air forces. I have 2 H2 wars in hand, also this blunder. Kimmo, for example, he doesn't seem to have a very nice way to defend himself. He has happy face issues already. He is down to 2 resource production now. It's just not looking great for him, and so he might not be able to defend himself very nicely. And so I thought that building 1 more unit could be quite nice. Maybe I can go for war the next turn. If an H3 government is available, then I'm maybe not forced to go for Air Force. I could go for a war and just build another knight, maybe if democracy is available, and could still go for a war. Or there is Marlene in the game, so if Marlene is available the next turn, I could go for war, go for 1 Air Force, and actually have quite a lot of strength, because Marlene would help me fulfilling 1 more tactic. So I thought building this rifleman now could be quite nice, and could maybe allow me to go for some pressure over the next turns. Of course, going for those H2 wars might mean that I don't get a lot of draws in, but I think just getting a big culture lead now and forcing the other players to react to my military push might just be the recipe that could lead to a win in this game. And so no, I was willing to just upgrade this now for relatively cheap with the efficient upgrade. It means that I have less science production compared to keeping the lab maybe for a little bit longer, but yeah, it leaves the door open for some very aggressive military plays. And also I draw 1 colonization card, another aggression. Kimmo seeds, the vast territory is revealed, and I think I maybe bid a little bit too much here. I actually bid both. I bid one knight, one rifleman, and a card. I just thought that helps Kimmo quite a lot, fixing his happy face issues, and I don't want to get him this. I don't want that he gets this too cheaply. But winning it myself would definitely take some military pressure away. If Kimmo wins it, maybe you can just punish him with a war over territory and take the yellow tokens like this. So I'm not sure if I should bid that much just to make it more expensive for him, because if I win it, I don't think it would be that great for me. Maybe just bidding one rifleman and a card, or maybe two knights and a card would be enough. But at the end, I don't get punished for it. I actually do make it more expensive for Kimmo, and he has to send away two swordsmen and two cards. So it's definitely not that cheap for him, but like this, he doesn't have any uprising issues, so it's probably worth it. Now he can increase his population, he can rebuild a swordsman that gets him out of corruption. Then he takes the rich land, the fission upgrade, so he takes some resources now, also takes the rockets. Develops the selective breeding, he also somehow has to make space in his hand, and at least he will get some additional food production like this. And he also grabs the modern infantry, so maybe he also just wants to grab some options away to maybe that Footloop can't that easily fulfill any H3 tactics, but he has now again a lot of cards in his hand, so it's still not looking that great, but at least he has a little bit of culture production ongoing. You can also take a quick look at the overview now that we are in the beginning of H3, and we can see that I already have now a lead, and my lead will get bigger every turn, and hopefully with going for a little bit of military, the other players can't start also producing some culture, and then I might have quite a strong position now that they have the air forces. I think missing out in the air forces could be a way how I could get a lot of trouble in this game, but I got the first copy of air forces, and now I was relatively confident about my position. Footloop seeds, and now the developed territory is revealed. I had knowledge about this one, and this time I wasn't willing to bid that much for it. This time it doesn't really fix any uprising issues of a player, so I was only willing to bid one knight and a colonization card, because I kinda wanted to, as I said, maybe going for those wars, and so I was willing to let Footloop win this. And he wins it, and he actually has to send 3 warriors, which is quite expensive. Of course, he could have also taken it for just one cavalryman, but that allows him to make a transition into hussars even more easily, or just getting more cavalrymen is now more easily, and delays his famine issues that he might have at some point when he, with just being in 3 farms. So that definitely looks fine. But he actually won't go for cavalrymen, instead he goes for cannons, which means that he maybe either has mobile artillery available, he's even willing to destroy a temple, which is interesting. Either he has maybe mobile artillery available, or he already drew a mechanized army, so that will be interesting to see. Now it's my turn, and as you can see, I go for war over territory, and as you can also see, Marlene is on the row. And that might just be very, very strong for me. I was willing to take Marlene for 3 civil actions, go for her, I increase my population, I go for air forces, and I build one air force going up to 47 strength, and hopefully I will steal now a lot of yellow tokens away from Kimmo. One thing that I didn't like about this is that the second copy of Democracy might be gone before my next turn. But it might depend on whether Kimmo will resign or not. It might be that he resigns, but I mean, he has still a little bit of more culture than Footloop. He will get one more production in, so maybe he still has some hopes left. Maybe he can hope that I will go against Footloop with some other wars. So I think it might be too early to resign. If he resigns, then the democracy will be discarded. If he doesn't resign, then it should be almost for certain that it will be available, or it is actually for certain, because Kimmo can't take Empire State Building, can't grab the rockets because he already has those in hand. He could of course take the democracy away, so that would be one way how I not get it, but it can't be discarded on Footloop's turn. And so I was hoping that I maybe still have a shot to go for the democracy the next turn, because that might just be a very nice technology for myself. But I think, well, I was willing to not grab the democracy this turn to get this big war going, cause a lot of issues for Kimmo, also force Footloop to build up more military, so that he can't do anything else very nicely. And then I can maybe even go for war over technology the next turn and build another air force going up to 60 strength, maybe then going for this war over technology against Footloop, maybe stealing his strategy or something. So I think this just opens up some very strong possibilities, and so I was willing to do this, even though it might mean that I miss out on the democracy. Of course, Kimmo might resign, then I only get 7 culture, but at least I get 7 culture. I still have military pressure ongoing against Footloop, and I have in a duel against Footloop, I think that would actually also be in my interest. Because if I don't go for a war against Kimmo, then he might still be relatively vulnerable, and Footloop, if he has maybe a mechanized army, could build up a lot of strength. And if he manages to get maybe some wars against Kimmo, maybe one big war at a time when he can't resign, that could be a little bit dangerous for myself. So I think if Kimmo ends up resigning, it's also not the worst outcome for me. Sadly, I don't get any draws. That's of course the disadvantage of going for this war over territory. Kimmo goes for the wave of nationalism, so he isn't resigning. He goes for Churchill, who of course might be quite helpful for him. But even with Churchill, he can go for cannons. Maybe he has a Napoleonic army. And he actually has mobile artillery, that also gives him a little bit more strength, and he is now at 28, but he still will lose a lot of yellow tokens, so that definitely will lead to some issues for him. And as we can see, there's actually immediately the next war, so it is not looking great for Kimmo. A hybrid war is declared against Kimmo, and that of course might hit him really, really hard now that he will lose that many yellow tokens. And Footloop will go for revolution to democracy. After this, he has still 1 civil action left that he can use to get 1 more free population, and he builds 2 cannons, and you know what that means. He indeed has the mechanized army tactic going up to 45 strength. So that's definitely not bad, and yeah, that could maybe also make him a little bit threatening. If he maybe gets the air forces, I have to be a little bit careful, because I also could get in danger. At my turn, the military theory will be available, so I thought that after stealing those yellow tokens, I could maybe just go for the next war over technology, and then I could go for military theory, develop it, increase my population, build an air force, go for a very big war, and I would still draw 3 cards, which is nice. But there's one bad thing about it, and that is that I then again don't have the civil action to grab the democracy. And there's another thing about it, because I thought that I maybe want to go against Footloop, so that I also put even more pressure on him. But the problem is he has chances to defend himself. So yeah, I will actually end up going for a blunder, but let's first talk about a potential war over technology. Footloop has just not enough resource to go for another army, but there's one unknown event, and actually one of the known events from me is the wealthy territory too. And that could allow Footloop to go for a 3rd mechanized army, and then he could even win the war over technology. So I didn't really want to risk anything in that regard. And of course I could go against Kimmo, but when we just take a look at Kimmo's situation, yeah, I just thought that now it might be the time to resign. He will lose culture to Footloop. Of course, it's always a little bit of players' preference if they prefer to resign or not. Some players just like to play on, some players resign, but I think that might be a situation where it is just fine to resign. I think I would resign in such a position. And then if I go for the war over technology against him, then yeah, the war might just be cancelled. Of course I would get 7 culture, but yeah, maybe it could go for war over technology and not go for the military theory, just go for the democracy. That could be an interesting option. But in the end, I just made a decision to go for the blunder and then get some food and resources out of Kimmo before he hopefully will resign. I was a little bit afraid. If he doesn't resign, I didn't get a lot of draws in. I don't have a war over culture yet. And if Footloop has some big wars over cultures and Kimmo ends up not resigning, if he doesn't resign now, he might not resign at all, then yeah, Footloop could maybe go for some big wars against him. So I was a little bit worried about it, and I was hoping that he will just resign now. Now that I don't go for a war, I can maybe just go for this democracy, getting more civil actions, getting more culture reduction. I could even maybe just build an opera. And also, by the way, I took 3 food and 2 resource from the blunder, because with taking 3 food, I only get one additional blue token that makes it easier for me to get out of corruption. Now I can increase my population, and then I will have only 2 blue tokens lying around at the food. Now, so I go for democracy, and then I increase my population to get out of corruption. I could build operas. However, if Kimmo does resign, and I was kinda expecting it, then I think when I'm only off against Footloop, his biggest hope might be to go for some wars against me with his mechanized army if he gets the last copy of Air Forces. And so I have to be a little bit careful. I didn't want to commit too many resources to operas. I made the decision that I want to have the engineering. The Cold War's in the deck, then maybe I have the chance to get for this. There also is still all the copies of Revolutionary Ideas left, and it might just be a nice card for some impacts, of course, but also to maybe get a lot of stages of the Red Cross going. And so I was willing to pick this for 1 civil action, and then for 3 civil actions I think maybe I make a mistake here, because I take the military theory, but the more important card might actually be the military build-up. I was maybe a little bit too afraid of the scenario that Kimmo doesn't resign and that Footloop then just goes for a lot of wars. First of all, Footloop didn't draw that many cards, and even if he gets some wars off, maybe that in the second war Kimmo will resign, then because then there might just be no hope at all left, and maybe I was too much concerned about this. I was just thinking if Kimmo doesn't resign, it could be very important to have a way to get more military action, so that I maybe also have a chance to join in those wars, potentially, but I don't have a war yet. And I might get enough science for military theory with Cold Wars and Revolutionary Ideas. But if Kimmo does resign, which I thought is maybe more likely, then I think the military buildup is more important, because then I will get one of those military theories anyway at the next turn, and then the military buildup could be a very important card to make sure that I can defend myself, hopefully very comfortably, against Footloop. But the military theory could also end up being important, so it's not a bad card to take, but I think the military buildup is the more important card here. I was just thinking that I have a lot of resources, but I definitely could need every resource that I could get if Footloop maybe gets really aggressive. And as we can see, Kimmo indeed resigns. Footloop now only scores 7 culture for his war. At least he has the second place secured now, so that's maybe not bad for him. And his out against me to maybe win the game is probably to go all in on military now. And he will increase his population. He builds a farm, increases his population again, takes the military build-up, takes the reserves, takes the multimedia and the urban growth. So he takes a lot of cards for the military, but also maybe some peaceful cards. Maybe he doesn't have another war yet, but he also is building another cannon, making sure that he's stronger. So sadly, he is now better prepared for the Cold War. Now it's my turn. I built 1 Air Force that gets me out of corruption, so that's one nice thing, and it gets me out of corruption without me having to increase my population, because the thing is, if I don't increase my population now, then I have just enough food to get 3 more populations at the next turn. If I increase my population 1 or 2 times, then I miss 1 food to get this 3rd population at the next turn, so that is just quite nice, but it also has something bad, because I get strong again, which on one hand is nice for Cold War and maybe the one unknown event in there, but it also means that Footloop can use the military build-up. But he has a lot of resources anyway, so it might be nice for him, but I get out of corruption. I'm at least prepared for the events, so I was at the end willing to build this Air Force. Then I definitely want to get this revolutionary idea for 1 civil action that allows me to develop the military theory at the next turn. And Footloop has 12 science available, it's just enough for Air Forces. If Air Forces are on the row, he might be able to go for a war already at the next turn. I can defend myself reasonably well, but it could get relatively closed. So I thought that maybe it could be better for him to wait 1 more turn to go for the war, unless he maybe has 2 wars, but he didn't draw that many cards. I mean, some cards, but he already had 1 hybrid war, so then he would have drawn quite a lot of cards, quite a lot of wars. Yeah, but I definitely have to be careful about my military, and so I definitely wanted to take the reserves. I thought that this might be the more important card than the patriotism, because now that Kimmo is out of the game, I don't have any offensive or aggressive intentions. I don't want to go for war myself. And with the military theory, with being able to go for this at the next turn, I should have enough military actions. And I also took a look at Footloop's turns, and I also thought that the military action doesn't make a big difference for him. So for both of us, it might just end up giving an additional draw, which is of course not bad. But the reserves has the possibility that I can play it for food. And there's this red cross, and so I thought I rather want to have the reserves than the patriotism, but I can of course also still take the patriotism. And so for my last 3 civil actions, I was thinking if I maybe rather want to have patriotism or revolutionary idea. Of course, I could maybe also think about just playing this revolutionary idea already this turn, maybe increasing my population, but then again, as I said, I don't really want to increase my population this turn so that I can get 3 population out at the next turn. And now, it could be an idea to do this, so that I have already spent more civil actions in my civilization, but if Footloop indeed goes for a war already the next turn, then increasing my population now would mean that I have to destroy one more thing at the next turn, which I didn't like too much. So now I came to the conclusion that I want to take one of those 2 cards, and I'm not sure if I make the right decision, because I end up taking the revolutionary idea. My idea was that when I go for military theory, thanks to this revolutionary idea, I will have enough science still to go for another technology after this. For example, engineering that I have in hand. Tanks could maybe be interesting. So, no. But maybe I don't actually need it, another technology. Because, no, I maybe just should focus on defending myself. And after military theory, I maybe don't really need any technology. Tanks, of course, might be interesting, but I get some more population out, so I can just go for one more army, one more air force, and then maybe just build more units. I don't know if tanks will make a big difference, and then maybe just having the additional resource from the patriotism in hand could be quite important. And yeah, both cards could be useful for Footloop, so I think both cards. I don't think it makes a big difference against him. As I said, the military action of patriotism might not make a big difference for him. He already has one in hand. So, yeah. But I'm not sure if the revolutionary idea is the right pick here. Maybe just taking patriotism is the better idea. I just thought I still have those 2 reserves. I still have this reserves. I was hoping that I have enough resources for my military. But if Footloop is going for a war already the next turn, then I might not be able to use both of those reserves, and maybe then just having even more resources available could be nice. But maybe it will also end up being nice having the option to go for another tech after the military theory. Throw away the war technology. Sadly, I don't draw an impact, at least another colonization card. It could also be nice to defend myself. And as you can see, Footloop goes for a war already this turn, but that war it shouldn't be able for him to go for a big war already this turn. But I was a little bit afraid, because it might mean that he has 2 wars already, but actually it might not be that threatening, but we can see this at my turn. Footloop goes for this war. Air forces are sadly available for him, so he plays the military build-up, he takes the air forces, he switches to Bill Gates after using Newton to develop the air forces, he builds one, destroys a mine, and then builds another one, and even another one is now at 83 strength. After the game in the chat, he told that if he didn't build a farm at this turn, he could have maybe set up for something even bigger, and that it maybe was a mistake, that he maybe should have taken the famine. I didn't do all calculations, but yeah, maybe he would then be able to make all of this even bigger. He would have one more free civil action this turn, and if he maybe already would have built a unit at the last turn, who knows how much strength he maybe could then achieve. Then he could maybe get another army going instead of getting this air force, which isn't fulfilling another tactic. So then yeah, it could maybe make a difference, but of course he also would have some famine, so that of course also would be a downside. So Footloop is now at 83 strength, which is definitely somewhat threatening. Takes the satellites, and with the reserves he has enough resources and also enough military actions to go for another war, and then to go for 2 more H2 units, which will give him another tactic, and he already has the air force for this tactic, so then if he has another war, he will be able to go for more than 100 strength. And that is definitely somewhat dangerous for me. But I can also defend myself relatively nicely. I can go for this military theory. Now I can increase my population 3 times, I can destroy 1 mine, and then I can just build 1 more army. And as you can see, that also puts me at 83 strength. And the good news is, of course, Footloop has the Amici Castle, but if he sacrifices, then his next war will be a lot weaker because then he can't get this additional army going. So it might be that this war might just end in a tie, or maybe Footloop doesn't have a second war, but then this war might just not be big enough to catch up to me. So that is quite nice. I just tie in this war now. I could think about maybe just destroying another mine, building one warrior just to even win the war. Then that would be even more awkward for Footloop because he then would lose the war, and if he sacrifices, he can't go for a big second war. So I was thinking about doing that. Maybe I should actually do it because it could end up being quite a big swing. And yeah, so maybe I should do it, but I have to destroy this mine already then. And it might mean that I can defend myself less good at the next turn because I might lose those reserves. I have less resource available, and I would spend those. So I actually don't have enough resources then for one more air force. So I think it's good that I didn't do it. But it would be interesting because it would make things a little bit more awkward for Footloop. But sadly, I would not have enough resources then to go for one more air force at the next turn. So I don't think that is an option if I should lose those two reserves. And so with my last civil action, I just played one of those reserves for resources. I could also just take the patriotism. That would actually mean that I have enough resources to go for 2 air force at the next turn. Of course, the second one doesn't give me another tactic, but some more strength. Now I can only go for 1 air force and 1 rifleman. That should be the best I can do now. Or maybe 1 air force and going for 1 tank, 1 upgrade to tank. No, but if I take the patriotism, I have to use another civil action to play it. And the good thing is that I can use those reserves also peacefully. So I can also maybe just threaten to finish a wonder like this. Not only the Red Cross, if this is denied, I can only also finish the space flight. It might not be possible. And the difference between being able to build 2 air forces or 1 air force and 1 rifleman is maybe not that big. And so I just played those reserves instead of going for the patriotism. I draw another colonization card and the impact of colonies, which at the moment isn't too great for me because Footloop has 1 colony more. Footloop doesn't sacrifice, which probably indicates that he has another war incoming. And he indeed has. He goes for the second war and he can go for 1 cannon, destroy 1 farm, play the reserves and goes for another cavalryman. Interestingly, he destroys this farm. That will mean famine this turn. But if he destroys a mine, then he doesn't have enough resources to threaten to go for United Nations at the next turn. Now he leaves himself with enough resources to threaten to go for United Nations. But he will have even bigger famine issues at the next turn. And maybe he could have thought about destroying a lab. Of course, that means 1 less Bill Gates bonus at the end, but only 1 less resource. He would still have enough resource to finish. The United Nations could maybe then avoid the famine this turn. So no, but I didn't calculate everything through, so I'm not sure if that would actually be better, but maybe an interesting alternative. So Footloop goes for this big war with 109 strength, and he can sacrifice, so he can go up to 114 actually, so that's definitely not bad. But again, I also cannot defend myself reasonably well. I can go for 1 air force, can go up to 96 strength. I could destroy something, build another cavalryman, and actually I could even take those reserves and maybe then with those build another air force. But I at the end made just a decision that I want to have this Red Cross. I don't want to play the reserves for resources so that I can take those for food, and then I can just build a bunch of stages. I take the Urban Growth, that will allow me to also build an opera at the next turn. And even with not increasing my strength even more, even with Footloop doesn't sacrifice for the war and then sacrifices for an aggression, thanks to those 3 defense cards I could still defend against an aggression. And so I just rather went for the Red Cross instead of destroying even more stuff to build more units. I mean, destroying stuff is maybe not even that bad. There's no single impact in up to this point. And I don't have any impact in hand where it would make a difference. But still, this Red Cross might be quite nice. Footloop is kind of forced to take those reserves away because that would mean even 1 more step for me. And then I just thought that it should be a nice ending for me. Footloop can't that easily build a stage. He has to play reserves, then he can't play those for resource to finish UN. But even if he plays it for food, then he has still famine issues after he spends the 3 food. So yeah, I kind of wanted to have this red cross. Footloop steals 23 culture, he sacrifices an air force, so quite a big war, quite a lot of strength going on in this game. And then he seeds. The wealthy territory is revealed, and I was actually willing to bid quite a lot for this. I think I bid 2 whole armies with air forces and all of my cards. I think it was a bid of something like over 70. Why did I bid this much? First of all, normally it's dangerous to bid that much because it might be punished by impacts, but now there's only 1 impact in the deck, and I have the impact of colonies in hand, so I don't think I have to be overly concerned about it. Of course, if there's impact of competition or impact of population, it might be annoying, but I thought the 9 additional resources might be quite valuable for Footloop, because then he can maybe finish United Nations and still do some other stuff. Especially if he has another nice impact, then United Nations might be quite strong for him to evaluate this different impact. And so I was willing to bid quite a lot for this, and I was quite surprised that Footloop only bid 3 and I get it for 4+. But maybe he figured out that United Nations just isn't that great for him, because he won't go for it. He plays for reserves, builds 1 stage of the Red Cross that gives him 6 culture, builds 1 arena, destroys this mine, builds 1 farm to not have famine, develops satellites, plays endowment, and then takes the reserves away so that I can't finish the Red Cross at my turn. At my turn I see the impact of colonies in. Maybe I shouldn't just see it. I mean, the 1 event I have knowledge about, Cold War, doesn't do any harm to me. And then there's 1 unknown event, so no, it ends up being nice for me, the National Pride. But I mean, this game might be 1 for me anyway, but maybe I shouldn't take any risks. And just for the 3 culture of seeding, maybe I shouldn't risk getting hit by something like Politics of Strength. But no, that's maybe also the only very bad event. Maybe Historic Territory could be dangerous, then Footloop could maybe go all in for this and win that. So maybe I shouldn't seed here, and maybe I should, just not seed, but it ends up being nice. I win the National Pride. I can play the reserves for food, I can develop the engineering, build 3 stages of the Red Cross for 18 culture, and then, thanks to the wealthy territory, I can actually build 2 more operas and also 1 more theology, going up to 27 culture reduction. And then that will be quite nice, and I will end up being at 195 before the final impacts, and that is just too much. There are only 2 impacts in the deck, and with that it should be certain that I will win this game. The first impact is the impact of happiness, that's the same for both of us. And then the second one is the impact of colonies, which is also the same for both of us. Now that I won the wealthy territory, so yeah, I am able to win this game at the end. No, it was a relatively clean game for me. I mean, from the beginning, the first 3 turns basically, I didn't have to think any, or almost, I didn't have to think about it, because the decisions were just that clear. A lot of strong options were available for me. And also in the rest of the game, then in H2 with going for Bach, some of the turns were just relatively clear. Of course, I still had to make some crucial decisions. I think going for Rifleman was very, very important. It was very nice that those were available. It was, of course, very nice that they got the opera. And then I just had a very nice position with getting Bach, and with having Harvard College, being able to upgrade those labs, while still having a little bit of science production left. And then I got the early air forces, and I could go for a lot of military pressure myself. Footloop also got a nice tactic. After Kimmo resigned, he was able to pull 2 wars off. One of those ended in a tie, but he definitely put some pressure on me, but my lead was just too big, and so I ended up winning this game at the end. Kimmo maybe didn't play that ideal this game. Going for the Eiffel Tower was not that ideal. He didn't really manage to build a strong economy, so no, maybe he didn't make the ideal decisions this game, but that just happens sometimes, and so he had to resign in H3. And no, of course, at the end, I'm very happy that I have won this game. And then we can also take a look at the standings now. And has also one other game finished, and Marta Pescher also was able to win another game against Footloop and Andre the Giant. And with those 2 games finished, it now actually is 100% clear that one of us will win the league at the end. We both are at 17 points. We both played quite a nice season so far. And Footloop has only 1 game left. The other players are too much behind in points, so no of the other players can catch us now. And now that of course might be now an interesting finish. We are again equal in points. There's only 1 game that I will play against Marta Pecheur in the last 2 of the games that are still remaining. And this game will be the next game on this channel. So I hope you are looking forward to this. It might be very interesting. It might be this deciding game of the season, playing against Marta Pecheur. And then Footloop has managed to get 2 second places in, which gave him some point, which could be important for him to stay in the league, but he definitely isn't safe yet. And the Giant is now in a tough spot. He, I think, needs 2 wins now to have chances to stay in the league. Or maybe he could somehow manage it with 1 second place and 1 win, but then I think everything else has to go right for him. And Kimmo, of course, also has a difficult spot, has 4 points, but of course with 2 points more within the Giant, he has the better chances, but all of those 3 players could still manage to stay in the league, so that also will be interesting. So I hope you're looking forward to the conclusion of the season. 2 games are left, the next game will be against Marta Pecheur, and now, then I hope it was an interesting game for you. Have a nice time, and see you in the next video.